Welcome to EPG Pathshala. My name is Asha Kuthari Chaudhary and I am a professor at Guwahati University. Let us look at our course on Indian writing in English and onto the module that we have called Socio-political Unrest in Kashmir, Abhishek Majumdar's The Djinns of the Eidgah. Abhishek Majumdar is one of the contemporary Indian playwrights who has earned international repute by writing plays with specific kinds of geopolitical and socio-political relevance. Majumdar started his literary career with the adaptation of Pratidwandi, which is a novel by Sunil Gangopadhyay, into a play. Based in Bangalore, Majumdar writes not only in English but also in other languages like Hindi, Urdu and Bangla. Abhishek Majumdar's plays have been widely staged in places like Bangalore, Thrissur, Thiruvananthapuram and Mumbai. His major dramatical outputs include Rizwan, Lucknow 76, Afterlife of Birds, An Arrangement of Shoes, The Djinns of the Eidgah and Harlesden High Street. Majumdar believes that theatre is a collaborative art and hence he puts extra effort in team building and performances. He uses the collaborative art of the theatre to explore the complex questions or issues which constitute the seed of his plays. Almost all his plays, we understand, are performed before they are published, and each of the new performances add to the final draft of the plays. For example, Harlesden High Street has been performed many times before it has been published by Penguin Books, and similarly, The Djinns of the Eidgah, the text that we are going to be now considering, has actually gone through numerous performances before it was published by Oberon Books. Now, The Djinns of the Eidgah is an attempt to represent the disturbing conditions prevailing in Kashmir. It makes a powerful representation of the contemporary scenario in Kashmir, where sanity is still a far cry. It is the story of a traumatized generation in Kashmir, a generation that is lost in conflict and loss. Before going directly to The Djinns of the Eidgah, let us look at other plays that Majumdar has had occasion to write. Rizwan, for example, is a play about a young boy and his experiences of losing his family. The story is based on Agha Shahid Ali's collection of poems, The Country Without a Post Office. His Harlesden High Street is a play about displacement and optimism. And through its diverse characters and shifts in time and space, the play captures the limited world of immigrants, their frustrations and their dilemmas. It is for his fifth play that he won the Hindu Metro Plus Playwright Award in 2008. Afterlife of the Birds deals with the life of an LTTE woman cadre and revolves around the issues of nationalism and loyalty. It is also a story of bravery, disappointment, and a moving generation. His Arrangement of Shoes is a solo performance with one woman set in a small railway colony from a town in India. The play deals with a complex web of different stories and memories represented by a single character, Rukhsar, who uses the shoes she has acquired to tell a family story in an exquisitely creative way. The play has been performed globally and has won the TFA Award for Creative Writing in 2010. This unit will discuss particularly the Djinns of the Eidgah and the issues and the context of the conflicts in Kashmir Valley, which has been in this particular state of disturbance ever since India became independent. The Kashmir story, which involves the partition of India and Pakistan on the religious grounds and gives rise to the Kashmir dispute, which has now become one of the major security concerns of the world, that not only affects the Kashmir Valley but the entire globe in terms of the pockets of insurgency and violence and war that are consistently perennial to this region. The same partition movement also gives rise to the problem of controlling the princely states, which are about 650 in number, all of which existed within the two newly independent countries. Jammu and Kashmir was one of those princely states, of which about 77% of the population was Muslim. But because of its location, Kashmir had to choose to join either India or Pakistan. However, the then Maharaja Hari Singh was the ruler of Kashmir, and being a Hindu king, he also chose to remain neutral without joining any of those two countries. But his hopes of remaining independent was dashed down in October 1947 as Pakistan sent in Muslim tribesmen to attack Kashmir. Now helpless, Hari Singh requested the Indian government for military help, and he signed the Instrument of Accession on 26 October 1947, giving up Kashmir to India. From then onwards, we find that Pakistan and India have fought many battles and many proxy wars, as they now refer to it, over the acquisition of Kashmir, causing heavy loss of life and property for the common masses. Thus, in the course of time, Kashmir has turned into a valley of conflict and become the bone of contention between India and Pakistan, each of them trying to control the region. However, in 1949, Kashmir was divided, with one part of it taken over by Pakistan and the other part by India. In 1972, when India and Pakistan signed a peace accord to settle their disagreements over Kashmir via peaceful means. However, further conflict again arose when particular groups wanted to join the Pakistani side while the other wanted to complete kind of freedom or azadi. There was the emergence of Kashmiri insurgent groups now who had their own set of demands. In July 1988, the Kashmir insurgent groups formally attacked the Indian governments with a series of demonstrations and strikes, which led to the police opening fire and imposition of curfew. From then onwards, the insurgency in Kashmir continues to pose serious problems and threats to the common people and to the Indian government. The insurgency in Kashmir is an internal conflict between Kashmiri insurgents, extremists, and the government of India. And this conflict has taken lives of thousands of people who have died during the fighting between these two groups. The grim situation that still continues in Kashmir and the atrocities and violence faced by the common people is still rampant, and one wonders who is really to be blamed for this situation, which seems to only mire itself in unending debates. The common people, however, in Kashmir are still deprived sometimes of their very basic human rights. The Djinns of the Eidgah takes into consideration all these delicate issues that have been affecting Kashmir for many decades. The first outbreak of violence in Kashmir was noticeable when the Muslim fundamentalists attacked the minority Kashmiri Pandits, and they killed numbers of these Pandits and destroyed a number of Hindu temples, giving rise to serious communal conflicts and social unrest. Even today, social unrest is dominant in Kashmir, and the recent attacks on the BSF Jawans and ceaseless cross-border firing and insurgents coming over from the border is a thing that one always comes across in newspapers. Now, if you look for a close reading of the Djinns of the Eidgah, let us try and figure out how the setting works. Obviously, being set in Kashmir, Abhishek Majumdar's play is a sensitive representation of all of the things that we have had occasion to discuss a little while ago. Now, with the help of the imaginary characters like Dr. Beg, Bilal, Ashrafi, Khalid, Mushtaq, and Junaid, the play powerfully represents the distressing yet real picture of Kashmir surrounded by insurgency, death, violence, fear, lack of freedom, mental conflict, and the crisis of identity faced by the Kashmiris. Like Rizwan, where Majumdar deals with the story of Rizwan whose life and family are torn apart by insurgents in Kashmir, the Djinns of Eidgah is also a play that explores the tragic impasse of Kashmir through the eyes of two children, Ashrafi and her brother Bilal. The play begins with a conversation between Abbajan, Bilal and Ashrafi, which is indeed a flashback. As the narrative progresses, the reader comes to know that Abbajan, whom we see in scene 1, is dead actually in reality. Bilal and Ashrafi lose their Abbajan in insurgency and grow up carrying the memory of his death with them. Ashrafi is especially unable to overcome the shock of having witnessed the death of her father. While growing up, she becomes a patient of post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, like Mala in 30 Days of September, written by Mahesh Dattani, which we have discussed in another module. The reader can sense the mental retardation which becomes a condition of Ashrafi's being in the beginning, when Dr. Beg tries to cure her strategically by playing a game of bus, which also serves as a technique to bring back the audience to Ashrafi's past. While playing the game, her continuous reference to curfew hints to something shady about her past, and throughout the entire play, Ashrafi exhibits some of the abnormal behavior patterns, the cause of which becomes clear in scene 2, when Bilal reveals the tragedy that has shaken their lives. Now, the shock of her father's death remains permanently etched in her mind, affecting her mental growth and creating a deep scar. She often goes hysterical, fails to distinguish between the past and the present, and exhibits extremely childish behavior. All of these are actually symptoms of PTSD. Ashrafi exhibits different symptoms in terms of a critical position and fails to recognize or differentiate between the real and the imaginary. The play highlights the latent anger and frustration of a group of Kashmiri youth amidst curfew, arrest, death, and lack of freedom. The young generations of Kashmir are not really allowed to enjoy any type of freedom for an indefinite period of time. They cannot indulge in any sports activities freely, or say, for example, playing football. Even for playing a simple game of local football, they need permission of the Indian soldiers who guard them 24/7. As Mustaq says, out of complete frustration, "This is your stadium. You play here. What are they doing here? Don't you feel ashamed, Bilal, when you have to enter your own stadium like a thief?" Unquote. The lack of freedom drives them crazy, and they vent their anger on the Indian soldiers by means of demonstrations, strikes, protests, and so on. The play actually projects the picture of a generation that is torn by the conflict, a generation who knows nothing outside of such conflict. Characters like Bilal, Khalid, and Mushtaq represent the pathetic conditions of Kashmiri youth amidst the conflict and lack of freedoms. The play represents violence that is operative and works in a contaminating way in the Kashmir Valley. It is a valley submerged by violence and counter-violence between insurgent groups and Indian soldiers. The play seems to add to what we know of René Girard's observation on violence in Violence and the Sacred. According to Girard, violence is self-propagating, and only violence can put an end to violence. It is eminently communicable, and like a raging fire, it feeds on the very objects intended to smoothen or smother its flames. Amidst the chaos of Kashmir, Bilal tries to find a last ray of hope in the upcoming football match. The match is more important than any of those processions. because if he wins the game, he thinks he will be able to take Ashrafi to some good hospital. The game of football provides him with a sense of distinctive identity and a means of escape, leaving aside the world of insurgency and conflict. Caught between the irreconcilable dream of freedom and familial responsibility, Bilal takes the risk of going out and practicing for the match. The loss that the Kashmir conflict creates is actually unestimable in terms of human losses. Now, they are not only struggling for their identity, but also want to compensate for the loss that their predecessors have suffered. The play that we are looking at, the Djinns of the Eidgah, is actually an interesting take in terms of what Majumdar refers to as a large mythology that the Kashmiri people believe in and still carry with them. It is a mythology of loss, and the Djinns represent the loss of their near and dear ones for whom the whole valley is now fighting for. The present generation in Kashmir wants to keep these ghosts or Djinns alive, the traumatized souls of those numerous Kashmiris who have lost their lives in this battle. Commenting on the war in Kashmir, the playwright adds that the Islamic culture is not utilitarian. They do not want any profit, but they want the Indians to pay for all those who were killed in the conflict. The conflict in Kashmir Valley leads to identity crises amongst the Kashmiris, forcing each character to face his or her inner demons, be it the Mujahideen son of Dr. Beg or Dr. Wani, who peculiarly feels relieved by pelting stones at those Indians. Majumdar seems to make an extensive study of the psychological condition of the people living in Kashmir, people like Ashrafi or Dr. Beg, who is unable to accept the death of his only son. The play delves deep into the repercussions of these violent memories that affects them in their present. The present is surrounded still by fresh instances of violence on a daily basis. Now, every time the Djinn appears on the stage, he reminds us of the torture that he and his friends had undergone at the hands of the Indian security forces or of the insurgent groups. The memory of suffering and loss is so intense that it is deeply set into the minds as deep as a scar. Herein the play takes upon itself memory and psychology. The delayed retrieval of painful memories of the past makes the life of the victim more miserable than in the present. The present of these Kashmiris is filled with such retrieval of the after effects of political violence undergone by their near and dear ones. A psychologist by profession, Dr. Beg himself is unable to come out from the trauma caused by the brutal death of his only son. He is always seen being questioned by his conscience whenever he goes into the Eidgah. Even very often he is seen talking to the dead, particularly his dead son, and this seems to indicate that Dr. Beg is also psychologically disturbed, like many of the other people of Kashmir. The functioning of memory is diverse as memory is invoked to heal, to blame, and to legitimize. Memory has become a major idiom in the construction of both individual and collective memory. It is a site of struggle as well as that of identification. Memories are not simply records of the past, but are interpretative reconstructions influenced by many factors. When memories of violence are recalled, these memories carry the additional burdens as indictments or confessions, as emblems of a victimized identity. In the case of Kashmiris, it is the memory of loss that constructs their current, present reality. They live with violent memories of their past when numerous Kashmiris were killed for nothing. Hence, they are not happy with their imposed Indian identity, an identity that deprives them of their freedom. As Beg says, "I'm Kashmiri, but I'm not Indian. If I were Maharashtrian, I would be." Unquote. Herein, the playwright also draws attention to the identity crisis faced by each and every Kashmiri. They find themselves in an in-between space, a liminal kind of space, for not belonging to either India or to Pakistan. The war in Kashmir seems to be a war for reclaiming identity and freedom rather than anything else. Majumdar seems to summarize the dilemma of these numerous Kashmiris in the powerful speech by Dr. Beg when he says, and I quote, "On the day of judgment, if Allah asks me, I am right or wrong, I will ask him in turn. Why didn't you say anything about us in your book? We, the people of in-between, what do we choose? Where do we go?" Unquote. The play is therefore an attempt to represent the complex situation of psychological factors surrounding the lives of the Kashmiri people, along with representing the reality about the Kashmir situation and its solution, a reality which is still confined to pen and paper. The playwright, Abhishek Majumdar, himself recognizes that this is a debate which has been continuing since after 1947. Many educated people have been fighting around this problem, which is a politically created one, making Kashmir one of the world's most militarized places with countless soldiers that curb civil and civic freedom. Not only does the play project the tragic condition of thousands of Kashmiris, but also the frustrated state of mind of many of the Indian soldiers who have been posted in Kashmir almost as a kind of punishment posting. The play also represents the pitiable condition of some of these Indian soldiers who vent out their grief and frustration on the Kashmiri people. This is really a vicious cycle. The outcome of the Kashmir conflict is not only devastating for the local people out there, but also to the soldiers who have been appointed in Kashmir to control the situation. Thus, the Djinns of the Eidgah makes an attempt to explore into the disturbed and violent mental conditions of the Indian soldiers living in Kashmir and guarding its people, as well as looking at the psyche and scars of the affected masses of Kashmir. After all, the Djinns of the Eidgah is a web of interwoven narratives with one single thread that connects them all, and that is the conflict and the memory of the conflict. The play comes to an end amidst political violence. Bilal is killed by the Indian soldiers after being taken captive. Dr. Beg is also killed by the Indian soldiers just before Eid. Innocence is lost and death is all around. With many unanswered and unanswerable questions concerning the Kashmir situation, the play draws to a close. It seems that the playwright wants the reader or the audience to contemplate, to think about these issues and, in some sense, take responsibility for them. So in this consideration of Abhishek Majumdar's The Djinns of Eidgah, the play that is written around and about Kashmir and Kashmiris, about the Indian soldiers that serve at Kashmir and the bloody conflict that has marred the psyche of the people there, is actually also to be understood as an exploration of the psychological scars that have been left upon an entire generation, not just one generation perhaps, but continuous generations of the people who live there. The play comes to an end amidst a political violence, again set in the same bloody context of a war-torn Kashmir. Thank you.